Fred the Gambler. Meet Fred. Average build with a bit of a slouch, ginger frizzled hair and a shy assisted demeanor. To him it was not a problem, he never associated with anyone. Every night, after a long day in the scorching sun at the docks, he would make his way home with his usual routine. First he would stop by the local food store. Entering the store, a bell would sing an inviting tune to its visitors. Fred would enter, greeting the cashier with his usual low-frequency bellowing voice. Evening, as he passed straight to the aisles. Disappearing for a few seconds, he soon after would emerge with his favorite soft drink, cookie cola, and a fresh bite into a hot meaty savory pie. Laying all his items on the counter, he would look at the lottery scratch card, contemplating his choices and always grabbing one just as he was about to pay. Upon leaving, he would try his luck scratching the card. Never succeeding, he would toss it towards the bin. He believed that if it would fly into the bin, the night would be a good and lucky night. He was never able to succeed. From the store he would make his way to his next destination. Between 2 blocks where a 3-way junction would meet there was a small alleyway. In the distance a neon sign would peer through the dark misty corridor. Fred would turn into the alleyway towards the entrance where the sign emitted from. He would knock on the door 3 times in a sequence. Knock, knock, knock. A slide in the door would open and a gargled smoky voice would answer. "Who's there?" "Fred." The door creaked open with a greeting from the doorman. "Welcome, Freddy. Hope the lady is on your side tonight." Everybody knew who Fred was. They all would welcome the man with open arms and laughter-filled remarks, hoping his streak would come to an end. Deep down they all felt sorrow and sadness for the poor man. Flashback. A few years ago, the first night when he was tempted by gambling, he won a large sum of cash, but as soon as he cashed it in, he got a phone call from the police. His wife died in an accident. He immediately rushed out of the gambling establishment, hoping the police got it wrong. Just before he could open the door, a man pulled it open with a metallic-tipped cane from the outside. In tears, Fred thanked him. The man replied with a soft voice, "No problem, Fred. You win some, you lose some." Fred didn't pay attention to what the man said and rushed to the hospital. Upon reaching the hospital, he burst through the 2 large glass doors. The officers all stared at him with hands at the ready, unsure if they were under attack. Moments later, he was approached by an officer, a stubby woman, with long blonde hair, blue-eyed pinkish cheeks. On her name badge above her bosom, it read, "MS Place." With a rough whiskey voice she asked, "Is there anything we can assist with, sir?" "I was phoned and told my wife has died in an accident," stumbling over his words with saddened disbelief. "Please follow me." She attempted to comfort him along the way. They walked to a stairwell at the end of the corridor. Cold air climbed up the staircase like heavy smoke hovering on each stair. "It will be a bit cold down there. If you need a coat, let me know," she warned. Making their way down to the morgue, he shivered from the cold air and anxiety. The door to the morgue was slowly opened by the officer as the frozen air carried death hovering in front of Fred. He wavered in his step, fearing what reality could hold. They entered. The room was well lit with white fluorescent lights, buzzing and flickering. In the middle of the room was a single autopsy table with linen covering a body. They approached the body. A sweet, familiar scent caressed Fred's sense of smell. A tear welled up in his eyes, knowing that, even before they lifted the linen, that a part of him laid lifeless on that table. He collapsed to his knees as he saw her beautiful, lifeless face. Slowly reality took over and crushed his emotions and feelings, compacting it all into a tiny ticking time bomb. On his knees, Fred's eyes jolted into every direction as the memories tore apart his mental fortitude. Tears started streaming down his face as the bomb began imploding in on him. His eyes spoke brokenness, his mouth moved but no sound came from it. He lost. The weeks and months that followed were empty with no activity. He stayed home sleeping the pain away. One morning, he got out of bed and went to the gambling establishment where he was the night of her death. He went to the table where he got lucky and sat there without making any bets. The establishment was not impressed with him not spending money and got thrown out the front door. Whilst laying on the rough, dry concrete, a business card landed next to his face. "This place might need some help," a soft, familiar voice exclaimed as he entered the establishment. Fred stood up from the ground, took the card and stumbled home without looking back to see who it was. The next day, a feeling urged him to phone the number on the card. Without any questions of who Fred was, he was told to start working the next day. Fred only had knowledge that it was next to the harbor. The next day he arrived at the harbor. A short man, rough pinkish sun-dried skin, walked past and told him to follow him. They entered an office where he was given orders to walk up and down the docks, carrying boxes of goods that needed delivering. With little thought he did what was asked of him. Fred wanted something to occupy his mind. Back to the present. Fred would leave the establishment every evening just before midnight, heading home to bed. On his way out of the building, the door was opened from the outside. He walked out, passing the man who held the door open. The man hid his appearance behind the door, only seeing the shadowy outline of a suit, top hat and a cane hanging over the arm which held the door open. "Thank you for holding open the door," as Fred passed the man. "My pleasure, Freddy. Remember to not buy a ticket but throw the cookie corer in the bin." The soft, familiar voice hinted as he closed the door behind him. Not paying it any attention, Fred walked home in his slouched demeanor. Reaching home, he opened the fridge door, peering through the empty shelves. With the same conclusion each night, he heads to bed on an empty stomach. Following the same routine each day, Fred woke up with a watered-down cup of coffee, trying to satisfy his empty stomach. Walking to work, he would stop by a house with a dog, petting it with the habitual greeting. Working the usual 9 to 5, he would unload and stock the cargo they received the day. A bell would ring, signaling the end of his shift. Taking his usual path, he entered the store, disappearing and reappearing from the aisles. Standing at the counter, he looked at the scratch card, contemplating the purchase as he remembered the words of the mysterious man. Exiting the store, he waited outside as he finished his cookie corer. He tried his aim and flung the can at the bin. To his surprise, it flew straight in like it was assisted by an invisible force. He felt a strange feeling within and rushed towards his second-last stop. With the usual knock and greeting, he went in and sat at the exact location when he won that night. The night started off as per usual, losing. A few minutes in, a man passed Fred and said with a soft, familiar voice, "Your lucky day, I see, Fredster." As Fred was about to look up at who tapped his shoulder, his attention was grabbed by the hand of victory as he won the jackpot. Everyone rushed towards Fred with surprised, congratulatory expressions. The night turned into a party, with everyone enjoying the victory with Fred. Drinks were on the house throughout the whole night. He was never the man to celebrate, but the emotional release took over his mind. Everyone, including Fred, got drunk on the excitement and continued till they passed out. In the early morning, Fred heard footsteps with a third offbeat knock on the ground approaching him as he laid face down on the floor. With a striking pain in his head, he opened his eyes. His vision was blurry. The footsteps came to a stop outside of Fred's peripheral vision. A hard metallic object crashed on the ground, rattling as it came to a stop. A hand with a black leathery glove reached in front of his eyes as it placed a piece of paper. The familiar voice whispered into Fred's ear, "Life is never a win-win, Freddy. It seems like the lady showed you some sympathy. You win some. Now the lady is expecting you to return the favor. You will always end up losing something, Fredster. Now it's time to lose some." Fred stared at the paper next to him and reached towards the object that was dropped. Without seeing the object, he slowly moved his hand over it. It had a grip which fit nicely into his hand. The spot where his finger was able to rest had a bit of resistance, like a trigger mechanism. It felt very familiar to Fred. Deep down he knew this day would come. From a distance, the voice shouted as it knocked the cane to the ground, "You know the lady has always been fond of you. What will it be, Freddy?" As the echo of the slammed door reverberated across the room, Fred reached into his pocket, pulling out a death-filled reminiscing coin. He pinched his thumb into his arched index finger and laid the coin on the thumb, ready to flip it in the air. What will it be, heads or tails, win or lose? He questioned himself. Fred was a reformed man, but the lady needed a debt to be repaid. The house always wins.